Have you ever picked up a book about, a really pivotal moment in history, maybe a complex political event, and found yourself just completely captivated? You finish it, and you don't just know what happened, but you almost feel like you understand how it all went down. And then you think, wait, how did the author do that?
Yeah.
Make it so gripping. What's the secret? Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain on one specific book, Michael Wolff's highly discussed Landslide, The Final Days of the Trump Presidency. But we're not here just to summarize the events. Nope. Our mission today is to give you a powerful tool, what we call a rhetorical analysis framework, to really understand how Wolff actually builds his narrative. What specific choices he makes and what makes this account so compelling. And yeah, sometimes pretty controversial. We're going to unpack his underlying purpose, look closely at how he uses language, structure, basically grasp the specific view he's presenting of those, chaotic final months. Okay, let's dive right in. So, to really get Wolff's strategy, we need to understand the context first, the rhetorical situation, as it's called. Let's start with the speaker himself, Michael Wolff. He's definitely a prominent American journalist, a columnist, known for a pretty provocative style, wouldn't you say?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely. Provocative is a good word for it.
And Landslide isn't his first time covering this administration either. It's the final part of his trilogy on Trump, following Fire and Fury and Siege. So he arrives with a certain reputation already baked in.
Exactly. Wolff has really carved out a very specific niche for himself. His reputation, it's built on gaining what he presents as unparalleled insider access, and then using that to create these incredibly candid, often quite unflattering portraits of powerful, high-profile figures. That immediately sets a particular expectation for you, the reader. You go in anticipating this sort of unfiltered, almost voyeuristic glimpse behind closed doors, and that really shapes how you approach the book.
Right, and the specific time period this book covers,
it
really zeroes in on those turbulent, often kind of bewildering final months of Donald Trump's presidency.
Yeah.
We're talking about the period right after the intense 2020 election campaign, through all the chaos surrounding the challenges to the results.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That shocking January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, and then, of course, the second impeachment trial that followed. It's a period I think many of us remember pretty vividly. So much public attention.
Indeed. A snapshot of a really highly charged, politically polarized moment. Now, if we think about Wolff's audience for Landslide, well, the most direct readers are probably those deeply interested in American politics, right? People curious about the inner workings of the Trump White House, and frankly, anyone who enjoys a good journalistic tell-all. They're looking for those juicy details, the insider stuff.
Yeah, the tell-all aspect is key. But what I find fascinating is how Wolff's style, the way he writes it, almost like a novel in its drama, it stretches beyond just the political junkies. Doesn't it?
Does.
The way he crafts the story, focusing on characters in these dramatic scenes, it actually pulls in a much broader audience. You don't have to be like a political science expert to get swept up in the human drama he's painting.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes less about abstract policy and more about this unfolding human story, which I think is a very clever rhetorical move on his part.
That's precisely it. And this leads us directly to what seems to be Wolff's dual purpose in writing Landslide. First, and this is pretty clear, he wants to inform the public, give a detailed behind-the-scenes account of the administration's tumultuous final days, the supposed inside story.
Okay, inform. That makes sense. But then, and here's where it gets really interesting and maybe a little provocative. His second aim seems to be persuading the reader away from the idea that all this chaos was, the result of some big, organized conspiracy. That's quite a claim.
It is a significant claim. Instead, he builds a case, piece by piece, really, arguing that the events were largely the product of President Trump's, erratic personality. The sheer sycophancy, that's a great word, meaning sort of excessive flattery of his advisors, and just a fundamental lack of any real strategy or coherent planning. This argument is really crucial for understanding his perspective and, frankly, how he structures the whole book to support it.
Okay, so with that framework, speaker, occasion, audience, purpose, how does Wolff actually do it? How does he make us believe him, get us emotionally invested, and build that argument? Let's dig into those rhetorical appeals. Ethos first is credibility. He famously claims insider access, says he embedded himself in the White House for a front row seat. How does he make that feel real to the reader beyond just saying it?
Well, he masterfully weaves his ethos throughout the narrative. It's not just a statement at the beginning. He constantly refers to unnamed sources close to the president, or he'll detail conversations overheard in the West Wing, or recount what one senior aide remarked. This constant, subtle assertion of his privileged position lends this immediate, almost like clandestine authority to his account. You feel like you're getting info few others have.
Right, like you're in the room.
Exactly. Pulls you into that inner circle. And of course, his existing reputation as a journalist who's tackled powerful figures before definitely bolsters that sense of unique access.
Okay, so that's ethos. But beyond credibility, the book just heavily relies on pathos, the emotional appeal rate, to pull the reader in. Wolff's narrative is absolutely packed with what reviewers called head-spinning anecdotes. How do those work on us?
Oh, they work powerfully. These anecdotes, they don't just convey facts, they evoke a really visceral reaction. Take, for example, the Wolff's description of the Oval Office on election night when Fox News called Arizona for Biden. He paints this picture of raw disbelief, the sudden lurch from confidence to, well, panic, the profanity-laced outbursts. He doesn't just report it happened, he reconstructs the scene, immersing you in the emotional chaos of that moment. You feel the tension, the sort of despair, almost like you were standing there. And his use of extensive reported dialogue, often with all the swearing included,
Yeah, that stands out.
it adds to that raw, unfiltered emotional texture, makes it feel immediate, maybe more authentic to some readers.
Okay, so he builds credibility, pulls our emotional strings. But how does he construct the logic of his argument, his logos? Because like you said, it's not a typical academic book with charts and data points.
You're absolutely right. The logo is more subtle. Wolff rarely comes out and says, therefore, this proves my point. Instead, his entire chronological narrative functions as his argument. He lays out this sequence of events, seemingly impulsive actions, chaotic decisions by Trump and the inner circle, by showing how one, maybe erratic move or irrational outburst led to another. From the election challenges, those frantic phone calls, the rally on January 6th, he implicitly suggests a cause and effect chain.
Ah, I see. So he lets the reader connect the dots.
Precisely. He leads your logic to his conclusion that these were impulsive acts driven by personality and disorganization, not some carefully executed, coordinated conspiracy. The evidence isn't stats, it's the cumulative weight of all these anecdotes and reported observations.
Got it. Okay, let's shift gears slightly to his specific rhetorical strategies, the tools he uses. What about the subject and tone of Landslide? It definitely doesn't feel like a dry history lesson.
Not at all. The subject is clearly the perceived collapse of order, of reason, inside the White House as the presidency wound down. And the tone, well, it's journalistic, yes, but it's undeniably sensational, almost theatrical, like a dark political satire at times.
Yeah, reviewers definitely picked up on that split. Some called it smart, vivid, and intrepid, while others use words like cruel, unforgiving, muckraking, and scandalous. Quite a range. And Wolff very deliberately uses this tone of like dark humor and biting irony throughout that really adds a unique flavor.
That biting irony is absolutely central, and his specific word choices, that's key to his style. He uses sharp, often visceral language to paint these really vivid pictures of chaos. You mentioned the Oval Office description like a kind of Star Wars bar scene filled with schemers and unqualified sycophants. Those aren't just neutral descriptions, they're cinematic images meant to stick with you.
And his prose, praised as vivid and intrepid, he effectively zeroes in on what he calls the kakistocracy. That's such a great word. Government by the worst people. Using a term like that in such a widely read book, it really underlines that critical, almost satirical edge, doesn't it?
It really does. And she's using such a specific, almost academic word like kakistocracy in a mainstream journalistic book is itself a rhetorical move. It adds this layer of sophisticated commentary, even amidst the sensationalism. Structurally, too, the book reads less like traditional political science and much more like a novel.
Yeah, that focus on narrative, on anecdote, rather than just dry analysis. It makes these incredibly complex political events feel really personal and immediate. He focuses on colorful characters, especially Trump and Rudy Giuliani, using their reported actions and dialogue to drive the plot forward. It draws you in like you're watching it happen. Creates a very immersive feeling.
And that ties right into another really powerful device in Landslide, irony. It's everywhere. The title itself, Landslide, is just dripping with irony, right? Taken from Trump's repeated false claim that he won in a landslide. It immediately sets up this tension between one version of reality and the version Wolff is presenting.
And he just consistently, almost relentlessly, juxtaposes the immense gravity of the situation, a potential constitutional crisis, with what he portrays as the, well, buffoonery and incompetence of the people involved.
Exactly.
This creates this powerful sense of the absurd.
Yeah.
And it just reinforces his main point again and again. This was driven by personality flaws, by chaos, not by some coherent strategic plan. It's a very specific, very impactful way to frame the whole story. So, okay, we've broken down Wolff's approach, his appeals, his strategies. How effective was he ultimately in achieving his purpose with Landslide? Judging by sales and buzz, he seems to have hit the mark, at least in terms of getting attention.
Oh, incredibly effective in achieving that primary goal. Telling a shocking, often darkly funny, and just undeniably entertaining story about the Trump presidency's end. It shot to the top of bestseller lists. Critics praised its readability, its compelling narrative. It absolutely captured the sense of chaos it aimed for and reached a massive audience.
And that style seems perfectly tuned for its audience, doesn't it? That mix of serious political reporting with a sort of gossipy, character-driven narrative makes it super accessible,
Yeah.
engaging for people who might normally tune out denser political analysis. A very savvy move to broaden his appeal.
Very savvy. However, while the internal logic of Wolff's narrative holds together pretty consistently within its own bubble, the wider conversation about its ethical foundation is, well, significant. Critics frequently point to that heavy reliance on anonymous sources, while it gives you that insider thrill.
Right, but you can't check it.
Exactly. It fundamentally lacks easy verifiability.
That's a crucial point. And maybe more pointedly, some argue that by framing these really serious political and constitutional events as this kind of foul-mouthed, darkly funny, almost scandalous drama, he risks trivializing things that were genuinely disturbing for the country.
Yeah.
What happens when journalism leans so heavily into entertainment?
That's the core question. By framing a political crisis as sordid and scandalous, Wolff's rhetorical choices definitely blur that line between rigorous journalism and compelling entertainment. The tension critics raise is this. Is the main goal to inform us accurately, responsibly? Or is it to create this captivating, almost voyeuristic spectacle, kind of like reality TV, that might inadvertently diminish the true gravity, the historical weight of what happened? That's the ethical debate that swirls around his work. What stands out to you about that particular tension?
Well, this whole deep dive into Landslide using rhetorical analysis, it really shows how authors like Wolff use a whole toolkit of specific techniques, ethos, pathos, language, irony, to powerfully shape how we understand big events. It really drives home that it's not just what is said, but absolutely how it's said. So maybe the final thought for you, our listener, is this. As readers, as consumers of information, especially about these really pivotal historical moments, how do we critically engage with stories that are, on one hand, incredibly compelling, maybe even entertaining, but on the other hand, spark these kinds of ethical questions? What does it really mean for our understanding of fact or truth when journalism and entertainment become so closely intertwined? Something for you to mull over as you navigate the news and stories all around you.